Good evening, everyone. How are you this fine Saturday night? I know people are still coming in. Um, we're talking, this is the third part of the Tabitha Shuck Rains murder. And she is from Tipton, Indiana. And last night they got hit severely with these storms and tornadoes. So just want to say that our thoughts and prayers are with everybody in Tipton and all the other affected areas out there that happened yesterday and are getting hit tonight. So I didn't get any of those storms. We got a lot of rain, sleet, ice, and freezing rain, and then snow last night here in Wisconsin. But I know others in Arkansas and Missouri and Indiana and many other states got hit last night. So I just wanted to start tonight out with saying, our thoughts and prayers are with all of you that are affected by these storms. I know there's a lot of damage in Tipton, especially at the park, trees down, light poles bent, hanging sideways. A lot of houses were damaged in Indiana last night. So just be careful with these storms if they're coming your way tonight and tomorrow. So let's see here who we've got here with us so far. Jill, how are you? Andrea, so nice to see you. Freckled Joy. Sierra. TTM Fangirl, hello, how are you? Hi, Cheryl, thanks for joining us. Olivia, too, same to you, good to see you. Let's see here. And we've got Christy here so far. I'm expecting that a lot of people are going to have to watch the replay on this tonight. As I said, there was a lot of damage done in Tipton. A lot of people are still without power in that area, and others around Indiana. But we're going to continue with part 3. Hello, how are you? Gloria, Mark is here. All right. So we're going to start tonight, and we're going to start reading some depositions and statements on this case. So all of you who have been following Frank and I with True Crime with Marvin Frank, I'm going to ask that you get your pens and papers out and you take some notes, or go back and rewatch it and take some notes, because all the eyes that we have on this are important. And if you see something or hear something that doesn't make sense to you, I would love for you to email it to me, especially all the contradictions, just so that we can make sure that we catch them all. Frank is behind the scenes tonight in the chat. He's watching. So thank you for that, Frank. And we've got Andrea here, who's one of our mods. I think some of our other mods might jump in here later on. But if you've missed parts 1 and 2, it's important that you go back and watch those, because it talks about the key players in the case, and part 2 gives you a little bit more information on those players and what happened the day that Tabitha went missing. Hi, Christy Lynn. So glad you could join us. So, like I said, we've gone through the key players now. We have talked about the day of. There's a lot more to go. in the subsequent days because she went missing on the 2nd of October and she was not found until the 5th. But tonight we're going to jump in and read some statements. Yes, Frank, I know WrestleMania starts tonight. I'm here, so we're good. Mark, good evening. The live on the Nashville disaster. You address a lot of issues troubling our country. Yeah, thank you. Boston Christian, how you doing? Mustang Girl, 1965. Hello, Melissa. As I said before, if you missed parts 1 and 2, please go back and watch them. Some of that information is key, especially since it gives you a broad range of what happened. And some of what we're going to read in these statements and depositions will make more sense. Also, I had previously said, if you've been following us for a while, you know that these cases are important. Different perspectives are important. So if you want to take notes and you see something that you think is important in this case, or contradictions or anything like that, please feel free to email them to me. So tonight, we're going to dive right in. And tonight, we're going to go over the statement of Roberta. Roberta is Michael's mother. Michael was Tabitha's husband. Yeah, Andrea says she has plenty of notes, but and she does. But anything that you guys find, we'll be happy to look at and make sure that we've got it all covered. So I'm going to share my screen here. I'm not going to keep the document up throughout the whole thing as I read it. Just because I don't think you want to stare at a document the whole time. But I am going to read each document word for word. So I'm going to share my screen here. So on the left, we have a picture of Roberta. And this is her handwritten statement from the day that Tabitha went missing and her version of things starting with that day and throughout the next couple of days. Like I said, this is Tipton Police Department, 225 East Jefferson Street, Tipton, Indiana. This is a copy, and the date on this is 9/3/2002, which right there causes me some confusion because this all took place on 10/2/2002. So the date for one, I noticed right away, is incorrect. Okay, and my pages are mixed up, so I'm starting on page 1 here. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so that I can see it, because some of it, it's hard to read the handwriting. So it says, once again, the date says 9/3/2002, page 1. However, Tabitha went missing on October 2nd, 2002. It says, at approximately 6:30 p.m. on 9/2/2002, Tabby came rushing into my house to drop off Drake. She laid Drake on the couch and went to put baby formula in the fridge. While doing this, she was hurriedly talking about going with Kyle Neff to the hospital, where his girlfriend's grandmother was, and they didn't expect the grandmother to make it through the night. She made the comment about not understanding why Kyle and Amanda wanted her to be there as they had been fighting and speaking to each other for a couple of months. So, if you remember earlier in the other parts, we did say the girls had a falling out and that they weren't speaking to each other. So, the second thing that I noticed in here, she says they had a falling out, or they had been fighting and speaking to each other for a couple months. I think she meant to say not speaking to each other for a couple months. I started to ask questions, but she said Kyle was waiting outside for her to take her to the hospital. She said to the effect about being back later, but didn't know when. Michael came in at 10:45 p.m., checked his mail, saw Drake asleep on the couch, and asked about Tabby. I told him what she had said to me about going to the hospital for Amanda's grandmother might not make it through the night, and made a comment about he didn't see why she went with them after not getting along and fighting lately. I asked Michael if he wanted to take Drake home with him. They asked if he could go back, shower, watch his show, and come up and get him. If Tabby wasn't back yet, Michael came back up at 11:25. Now, I don't know exactly what this word is here. He was, I don't know, didn't expect him till 11:30. He said it usually ended early. Anyways, I told Michael I was sleeping and said he had to go to work and school in the morning. When Michael went back to shower and watch his show, he called me shortly afterwards, said he had tried to call Kyle, but it was not in service. Says, would just keep Drake until Tabby got home. He said if she got home real late and didn't pick him up, he would send her up first thing when he got up for school. This had happened a couple times when she worked late at McDonald's. I was asleep when she got off, and so she had left him with me and came up first thing in the morning. And then it says, so it wasn't unusual. I stayed up until 3 a.m. and went to bed. Drake woke up at 5 a.m. and at 6:15 a.m. I called back to Michael's. Tabby hadn't come up, so I needed to make sure she was up in case she was still at the hospital. I needed to make sure he was up in case she was still at the hospital. Tabby wasn't there. Approximately 7 a.m., I called Cheryl's restaurant and asked for Debbie, Kyle's mom. I explained what I had been told last night, but that Tabby hadn't come home yet. That Michael had tried to call there last night and their number was out of service. And if she could give me their number. She did. I tried to call it and let it ring several times. I called Debbie back to see if their cars were out there. She said it was, but that they don't answer the phone in the morning. She then added that they don't the door either. Oh, they don't answer the door either, if I were to be on it. I called Kyle's number 2 more times, letting it ring about 30 times. I had a 10:15 doctor's appointment and I went to that, came home, Tabby still hadn't returned. I tried Kyle's number at 11:50 and he answered the phone. I asked if it was Kyle and he said yes. I told him who I was and asked if Tabby was there. He said no, he didn't think so. I asked if they were still at the hospital. He kind of said, huh? I told him what Tabby had told me last night, that Michael had tried to call, number not working, and that I had gotten number from his mom, had called several times this morning, getting worried. He told me that he did not take Tabby to the hospital, that he had brought her to my house at 6:30 p.m. when she dropped off Drake, and that he took her to Tipton Town and he had dropped her off at Village Pantry. He said she was to meet someone there. I asked if he knew who, and he said no, he didn't. At some point during the conversation, I had asked again if Tabby was there. He asked someone there, Tabby's not here, is she? And then told me they answered no. I called Michael's cell phone. It was a little after 12 p.m. today. I left a message to see if he had heard from her, as I hadn't, and asked him to call me on his way to school. He called shortly past 12:30 p.m. and said he hadn't heard from her and was getting worried, as this was unlike her to leave him so late in the morning. I told him about my conversation with Kyle and then asked if he could call me back. He was getting a text message from Tabby's parents' phone. I had called them between leaving messages for Michael and him calling and asked if maybe she had spent the night with her sister. No, and this wasn't Tabby, my thought also. Michael called me back shortly after. He said he had stopped at Kyle and Amanda's on his way to Indy, and Kyle had basically told him what he told me. After calling Tabby's mom later, I found out that Kyle was not saying he didn't bring Tabby to town, not to my house, but that she had ridden his motorcycle in town and saw her outside of VP, and that she was supposed to meet Liz Balser. I had already called some of Tabby's friends to see if they had, but this I knew anything. None of them had seen her since before 3:30 p.m., 9/2, and the day before. I usually made calls and appointments. I don't think that's usually. I eventually made calls and got Liz Balser to call, and she said she had last seen Tabby the day before, yesterday, when I had seen her outside. Also, that same day, Tuesday, she said she had been in Kokomo all evening last night and had made no plans to meet Tabby last night. Tabby's mother and stepfather came to my house a little after 6 p.m. tonight to get Drake for a while. They said they had stopped by Kyle's and his mother's, and they were not within home. Shortly after I left my home to go past Sheriff's Department to see if maybe that had asked him to come answer questions on something. As I drove past police station, I recognized my son's truck. Something behind post office. To police station. I asked if my son was there. Yes. He was back, answering questions. That I could take a seat and wait. I told the deputy that I was the last family member to see Tabitha before she disappeared, and he buzzed the door and told me I could go on back. Told John Alley all I know and remember to the best of my recollection. They asked me to write this statement. So it's kind of hard to read because some of the writing, but that is her handwritten statement. This is Roberta, Michael's mother. Mark says she called us around 11:30 a.m. the next morning. She waited to call us. She should have called us first thing that morning. Yeah. So now there is an actual tape statement of Roberta Souders, case number 16F13945. Now, I'm not sure who MT is, but that's the initials that I have here. Mike Tar, I think is how he pronounces it. So this will be a tape statement of Roberta Jones Souders. It's reference a death investigation. Case 16F Frank 13945. Today's date is 10/5/2002. The time is 8:57 p.m. Location, the Tipton City Police Department. Present are Roberta Souders, Sergeant Tim Miller, and myself, Detective Mike Tar. Roberta, would you state your full name, home address, and phone number? She gives him that information. He says, do you have a cell phone? She says, yes, I do, and she gives him the cell phone number. And do you live in apartment A or the first apartment of this residence? Roberta says, yes, I do. He asks, who else lives with you at that residence? Roberta says, my husband, Jeffrey L. Souders, and my oldest daughter, Sandra Rains. He asks, how old is Sandra? 21 or 23? 21 or 23. Do you have a daughter that lives upstairs in a separate apartment? Yes, I do. What is her name and that address? Michelle Rains, and she gives the address upstairs. He says her age and phone number for the residence. She's 21 and her phone number is. Do you also have a son that lives in an apartment behind your apartment in the same? It's in the same house, yes. So Mike says, correct. What is his name? Michael Franklin Rains. He says, and what is the address? And she gives it. And then he says, Tipton. And she says, Tipton, Indiana, and gives the zip code. And his phone number? She gives the phone number. And how old is Michael? Michael is 19. Is Michael married? She says, yes, he is. They ask, and what is his wife's name? Roberta answers, Tabitha Ann Rains. They ask, how old is Tabitha? She answers, Tabitha is 16. They ask, how long have they been married? She answers 7 months as of the 3rd of October. So they didn't even make 7 months. They were shy 1 day when she went missing. He says, and do they have a child together? She answers, yes, they do. And what is that child's name and age? She says that it's Drake, and he'll be 6 months old on the 7th of October. He says, when did you last see or have a conversation with Tabby? She answers, Wednesday evening about 6:30 when she brought Drake in for me watch. He says, question, where was her husband, Michael, at this time? She answers, he was at school in Indianapolis at Lincoln Tech. He asks, earlier, did you tell me that Michael works half days at a repair shop in Kokomo? She answered, yes, he does. And he says, and what is the name of that repair shop? And she answered, Burnett's. He asks, and then he goes to Indianapolis for school Monday through Thursday? She answered, yes, he does. He asks, and what time does he usually get home in those evenings, Monday through Thursday? She answers, about 10:45. He asks, and what day of the week was the last time you seen or spoke with Tabby? She answers, Wednesday. He asks, and he would have been at school at that time? And she answers, yes, sir. Now there's a typo in this because this should be Roberta, RS, responding, yes, sir. He asks, and was anyone else at your residence when Tabby came that evening? She answers, my middle daughter, Michelle, that lives upstairs, was down when Tabby came in. He asks, okay, who was with Tabby when she came to the residence? She answers, Tabby and the baby came in the house. She told me that Kyle Neff was outside waiting for her. He asks, did you see Kyle Neff? She answers, no, I did not. He says, okay, did you see his vehicle or a vehicle that he might have been in? She says, no, I did not. He asks, Tim, question mark? Do you know what he normally drives? Now this is the other detective. He has a white car and he has a motorcycle. He's been known to bring her and pick her up when she worked. Was seen on both of them. So, the other detective says, and you know what kind of car? She says, no. The detective says, is it like a passenger car or a truck or... She answers, oh, no, it's a white car. It's, I don't know, maybe like a Buick or something. I think it's, I can't remember if it's got 2 or 4 doors on it or not. But he says, do you know where Kyle Neff resides? She says, I don't know street address, but I know he lives on west on 28, just before you get to 31, in a greenhouse right before Cheryl's gas station. He asks, and does Kyle's mother own Cheryl's restaurant? She answers, I believe she owns it. I know if not, she's a manager of it, but I believe she is the owner of it. He asks, and did Tabby recently work at Cheryl's restaurant? She answers, yes, she did. He says, okay, and did you tell me up until about a month ago when she got fired? Is that correct? She answered, yes, it was about a month ago. He says, you stated earlier that it wasn't uncommon for Kyle to bring Tabby home, correct? She answers, correct. He says, and was that from work? She answered, yeah, from work, and there was times he would come and pick her up. Kyle and I took turns, you know. He says, so it wasn't uncommon for Tabby to tell you that Kyle would take her somewhere. She answers, right. That's Kyle's outside waiting on her, or that Kyle had just dropped her off. He asks, and what did Tabby tell you this particular evening? Her answer, she come in and she was telling me that she was going to the hospital because Kyle's girlfriend, Amanda, her grandmother was in the hospital. She was not expected to make it through the night, and she said it was kind of, odd or strange that she didn't understand why Amanda wanted her there because they hadn't really been speaking. They've been fighting for a couple of months, but that, Amanda wanted there. She felt she needed her there, so they were friends. So she was going to go. He says, is it accurate that Kyle and Tabby still had a good friendship? She answered, yes, as far as I knew. He said, okay, and Kyle is presently living with Amanda, correct? She answers, correct. And he asks, what is Amanda's last name? She says, I believe it's Pratt. He says, how old is Amanda? She says, I don't know. I think she's over 21, but I don't know. He says, does Kyle and Amanda have a child together? She said, yes, they do. He said, at one time, was Amanda and Tabby good friends? She answered, yes, they were until just a couple of months ago. He says, okay, and something happened that soured their relationship? She says, yes. I believe it had to do with the job out there or something along those lines. They were working together, and it's like they weren't. In the last few days that Tabby worked out there, they worked together, and they kind of looked like they were kind of splatting around a little bit. I was outside in the truck waiting for Tabitha. It doesn't really make sense, but okay. He asks her, so Amanda works at Cheryl's restaurant also? She says yes, or part-time, yes. He said, Tabby never told you what their argument or disagreement was about? She says, no, it really didn't look like they were like fighting. It was just like that they weren't really getting along. I mean, it was like, like when you're talking to somebody because you have to talk to them as you're walking by. And it was kind of like that. That was the kind of body motions that, are interpretations that I got. I could be wrong, but it wasn't like they were in there, duking it out or, screaming at each other. He says, and about how long was Tabby at your residence that evening? She says, just a few minutes. He says, and when she left the residence, did you see where she went, if she got in a vehicle or not? She said, no, I did not. It just wasn't odd. No, I did not. It just wasn't odd. He says, did your daughter? No. He asks, and this would have been approximately 6:30 p.m.? She says, right. I even asked Michelle. Michelle was in the kitchen, and we have a window that looks out to the front door. And I asked Shell if she saw Kyle out front or, in any vehicle, and she said no. And I specifically asked Michelle if she happened to see it, after we realized that Tabby wasn't with Kyle and Amber. He says, and what time did Michael get home that evening? She said he got home between 10:40 and 10:45 that night. He was a few minutes earlier than sometimes normally is, but it was just like a matter of a couple minutes. He says, okay, did he know where Tabby was? She said, no. He came up to my house looking for him. He said, did he make any attempts to contact her or try and find out where she was that evening? She says, well, yeah. When normally if they're not home when he gets home, they're up at my place. So that's what he did. He come. Drake was asleep on the couch and he was like, where's my other baby? I told him what Tabby had told me, and he thought it was odd that she was going to be with Amanda when her and Amanda weren't getting along. He asked her, was he able to locate Tabby that evening? She says no. He went home and tried to call out at Kyle's to see if Tabby was out there with them, or how the grandmother was doing and stuff, and the number was no longer in service. He says, did you try to call Kyle that evening? She says, no, I didn't know Kyle's number. He says, okay. The following morning, which would have been October the 3rd, a Thursday, is that correct? Uh-huh. Yes. Did you call Michael? She said, yes, I did. He said, okay, did you wake him up to make sure he went to work? She said, yeah. Because Tabby hadn't come up to get the baby yet. So I wanted to make sure he was up so he wasn't late for work. So he says, okay, did you inquire if Tabby had come home and was with him? She said, yeah. And I had asked him, and he said, no, she wasn't. And we kind of, inaudible, she was probably, still with them. He says, did you call Debbie Neff, Michael's mother? She said, no. Kyle's mother? He got the name wrong. And he says, I'm sorry, Kyle's mother. Yes, I did. And about what time did you, Kyle, call Debbie Neff? Okay. And about what time did you, Kyle, call Debbie Neff? Weird way to state that question. 6:37-ish. Closer to 7. He says, okay. And what information did you learn from Debbie Neff? She says, I specifically called from Debbie. I told her what Tabby had told me and that she hadn't come home yet. That Michael tried calling the night before and the number didn't work. And asked her if she could me and Kyle and Amanda's number so that I could call and talk to them, find out if Tabby was there. He says, did she give you the phone number? Yes, she did. Do you recall what Kyle's phone number is? Oh, I think. Did you try that number? Yes, I did. He says, or during your first conversation with Debbie, did Debbie tell you that she had stopped by Kyle and Amanda's on Wednesday evening? Her answer, yes. He says, when? Who was at home at that time? Answer, she told me Amanda was there. She didn't mention the baby or nothing, but she told me that she had been to Kokomo and she was coming home and she stopped by. Amanda was at home and that Kyle was headed into Tipton into town. He said, did she tell you what time she was at the residence? She said, no. He said, okay, by your conversation, were you able to estimate a time she might have been there? She says, well, yeah, from the way she was talking, if she was saying Kyle was headed into town, I assumed that it had been around the time he was picking Tabby up. And he was picking Tabby up. So I'm assuming 6, 6, 7 o'clock. He said, did Debbie tell you anything about if Kyle and Amanda was at the hospital that evening? She said, she told me that they were not at the hospital the night before because Amanda was at home. Kyle was headed into town. She said that Amanda had spent all day at the hospital. Her grandmother was in there and had knee surgery, and Amanda had went with her dad that day and had been there during the day. He said, did you learn if there was any emergency health issue involving the grandmother? She said, no, there wasn't. As far what Debbie told me. He said, did you also learn that grandmother was released the next day? Her answer, yes, I did. Yeah. Because Debbie was just like, it was like she had surgery on her knee, kind of. He said around noontime on Thursday the 3rd, did you make telephone contact with Kyle Neff? She said, yes, I did. He asked, what did Kyle tell you? Kyle, when I asked him if Tabby was there, and he's like, no, she's not. And I'm like, I started explaining, well, she told me that, she was going to the hospital with Manda last night. Are they still there? And he's like, no, and I was telling him what Tabby told me about she was going to the hospital to be with Amanda because Mandy's grandmother was in the hospital and that they didn't expect her to make it through the night. And he's like, I didn't take Tabby to the hospital. He said, I brought Tabby and Drake to your house and she dropped Drake off. He said, then I took Tabby up to the Tipton town and dropped her off in front of VP because she was supposed to be waiting for somebody. And I asked them then if he knew who she was waiting on or anything. And he was like, no, I don't know, I don't know who it was. So the detective asked, did Kyle tell you where he had picked Tabby and Drake up from before bringing them to your residence? She answers, no, but I had assumed they had been out at his house. And kind of confirmed that, or kind of put that because And the officer says, do you know where Tabby had been earlier in the day or afternoon before dropping Drake off? She said yes. She had been to the Learning Center for her first GED classes. He says, okay, and about what time was she at those GED classes? Roberta answers, Michael picked her up our front at 1:45 about. And she walked home. Got to my house to pick up the baby about 3:30. I know that about 4:30, her and the baby were going for a walk. And because she come up, I don't remember why, but something about the stroller. And I went out the door to let my dog out the same time they were leaving or something. And she was heading north on East Street, not towards town or anything. He says, so that was around 4:30? She says, yeah, and he says, on Wednesday? She says, yeah, and that was the last time I saw her until she rushed in to drop Drake off with me about 6:30. He says, okay, do you know if she went anywhere during the morning of Wednesday? She says, yes, she'd been up to my place because she'd come up to see if I'd take care of the baby and the learning. He says, is that while she was at the GED classes? She answered, no. She come up to my house about 11:30. GED people had called her and woke her up and told her that they had a cancellation or something and that she could start her GED classes from 1 to 3 that day. So she come up to ask if I could take care of the baby while she went to classes, and then she went back, and got a shower and stuff, because we can hear when the shower comes on. He says, so from 1 to 3 she was at the GED classes in Tipton. You had Drake. Roberta answers, right. He says she came back around 3:30, picked, and Roberta says, yeah, by the time she walked up. He says, Drake up. She says, yeah, it was about 3:30. He says, then at 4:30, you seen her going for a walk with Drake. She says, yes. She come into my house for something. I can't remember why, but I let my dog out as she was going in. And he says, and then when she came back around 6:30 and told you that she was leaving with Kyle Neff to go to the hospital? Answer, yes. He says, is that the last time you spoke with Tabby? She said, yes. He says, okay, earlier you stated that Tabby and Amanda were at odds, correct? She answered, correct. He says, do you know when the last conversation that Amanda and Tabby had? She said it was about 2 weeks ago at Marsh parking lot. He said, okay, were you and Tabby at Marsh? She says, yes, we were. He says, and then how did Tabby have the conversation with Amanda? Her answer was, Tabby and I had been in there getting stuff, and as we were coming to go out, that we were starting to walk out the one way, and Kyle came in the opposite door, because there's 2 doors. And he kind of called Tabby over to him, and she came back over, and she's like, Amanda's out in the car and needs to talk to me. She said, she handed me her groceries. She said, I'll be there in just a couple of minutes. I'm like, okay. So I took my stuff, her stuff, and the baby, and went out and got in the truck. And It took her more than a couple of minutes to talk. He said, at some point then, did you go over to the vehicle where Amanda and Tabby were talking? She said, yes, I did. He said, and then did you have Tabby get into the vehicle so you could go home? She said, yeah. I told her that my ice cream was melting. He said, okay, what did Tabby tell you about the conversation she had with Amanda? Roberta said, when she got in the car, she's kind of like, oh my God, you know? She said that Kyle and Amanda were going to be moving up to Greentown. And I'm like, why? You know, because number one, they work right there behind the restaurant. But anyway, they were moving to Greentown, and that Kyle had supposedly stole $2,000 worth of cocaine from someone down around Carmel, Indianapolis. And that this person had told them that they either wanted the money or they were going to kill his wife and baby. And so they're going to get a place and move to Greentown where these people didn't know where they were. And you know, I mean, so the detective asks, and as far as you know, is that the last conversation Tabby had with Amanda? Roberta answered, as far as I know, yes, it is. The detective said, and what, that was approximately 2 weeks before she disappeared? Roberta said, yes, sir. And he said, on Wednesday the 2nd? Yes, I could probably go home and find the receipt and tell you what day it was. He said, have you obtained any information to where Kyle has possibly changed his story as to what happened on Wednesday? She says, well, yeah. I heard he's told a lot of people a lot of different stories. I mean, I had heard that he changed it like 3 times between the time I talked to him at noon and I was up there at the police station at like 6 o'clock ish, 6:30 ish Thursday evening. He says, okay, have you had other than one conversation we've already talked about between you and Kyle? Have you had any other conversation with him personally? She said, no, I have not. He said, what are some of the variations you have heard him make? She says, okay, I've heard that I've been told that he is now saying he did not bring Tabby a drink to my house. I've been told that he said that he just dropped Tabby uptown in front of VP, that she was to be meeting Liz Balser. I've been told that he was just driving by on his motorcycle and Tabby was standing out front and he pulled over and said, hey, and she mentioned she was meeting with Liz Balser. I've also been told that he said that his wife, and his baby had come through town in the car, and one time I heard that they stopped and talked to Tabby, and another time that they didn't. I've heard that he drove by on his motorcycle and saw her and didn't stop. So I mean, I've heard all kinds of different things that He says, have you had any conversations with Liz Balser? She says, Balser? Yes, I have. He asks, how do you spell Balser? I believe it's, and she spells it. Do you know where she resides? I was told through questions and different people that she lives out in Country Living Trailer Court with her mother. He says, okay, do you know her mother's name? She says, Linda. I don't know if her last name is still Balser or not. He asks her, how old is Liz Balser? She says Liz is like 17, 18, 19 years old. I heard that she's been going into the hip hugger and stuff in Kokomo, but she's not old enough to be in there. He said, okay, when did you have a conversation with Liz? Her answer, I had a conversation with Liz Thursday late afternoon. And he says, okay, and that would be October the 3rd? She answers, yes. And he says, okay, and did Liz call you at your residence? And Roberta said, yes, she did. And he asked, why did Liz call you? She said, because between myself and my oldest daughter, we had been making phone calls to people that knew Liz, trying to find out what Liz's phone number was. Okay, did you and Liz talk about if she had been in contact with Tabby? Yeah. And what did she tell you? She said the last time that she had seen Tabby was on Thursday, the day before, was supposedly going to the hospital, that her and Tabby had, he says, just a moment. She says, okay. He says, okay, you had your conversation with Liz on Thursday, correct? Uh-huh. Yes. Okay. When was the last time Liz and Tabby were together? According to Liz and Tabby both, it was Tuesday afternoon. Okay, because I believe you stated Thursday. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. No, I talked to her Thursday. So now she's changing it back to Thursday. So Tuesday, which one was it? Tuesday or Thursday? So he says to her, so Tuesday, right? But 2 days earlier on Tuesday. Right. Liz and Tabby were together. Yes. And Tabby had confirmed that in a conversation on Wednesday with you. Oh, yeah. When she come up to ask me about Drake, keeping Drake. He says, and? She said, because I questioned her about Liz being out in the front of my house talking on the telephone. And that's when she told me Liz told me when she called. He says, did Liz give you any information as to where Tabby might have been or went after Wednesday evening, the last time you talked to her? Answer, no. She said that the last time she talked to Tabby was Tuesday. He said, did Liz indicate if she had talked to anyone that had contact with Tabby after Wednesday evening? Answer, not that I know of. He says, okay, just looking here. We're getting there. Roberta says, what Liz told me was that her and her mother had been at the hip hugger Wednesday evening, which was the night Tabby disappeared. She said she had not seen or talked to Tabby since Tuesday afternoon. The detective said, did she give you any information on who might know, who have information about what happened to Tabby? Answer, no. But she said if she had heard anything, she would call me. And I'm like, I thanked her, and He says, and this is the only conversation that you've had with Liz. Answer, correct. He asks, have you had any conversations with anyone else that might have information pertaining to what has happened to Tabby? Answer, I've talked to Emily Sprinkle. I stopped up at the courthouse Thursday and had to have the sheriffs come and unlock my truck because I locked my keys in. I talked to a bunch of kids that were up there. There was Erica Overly. There was Lindsay Groves' boyfriend. Then he stops her and he says, okay, of all these people though, have they given you any information that would help us to find out what happened to Tabby? Her answer, no. Of these few names you've given us, who are some of the close friends that Tabby has that she might have talked to about what had been going on in her life? Answer, okay. Like her best friends are Jamie Hamilton and Stacy. And I believe Stacy's last name is Johnson. But something I haven't told you. Stacy and Tabby usually only talk on Thursdays because that Stacy's day off. So she probably wouldn't have talked to Stacy since the Thursday before. So, and I don't know if she tried to call Tabby on Thursday because I couldn't. He says, does Stacy Johnson live here in Tipton? Roberta says, I don't know. She used to, but I don't know. He says, okay, does Jamie Hamilton still live here in Tipton? She answered, yes, she does. And does she live with her parents, Brent and Kelly Hamilton? Yes, she does. But you don't know the address or phone number, correct? She says, I have the phone number at home because Jamie came over to my house after talking to Gary Stout. Then she got off work that day and she came over, which was yesterday. He says, and earlier did you tell me that Lindsay Groves was a close friend of Tabby's? She says, not close friends. They were friends. They went walking because they both had babies right about the same time. So they both was like walking off post-pregnancy, But really hung out and be friends, no. But he says, okay, but it would be someone we want to contact. Answer, yeah. He says, okay, do you know her address or phone number? She says, I think she lives on the corner of West and Washington Street because Tabby had me go over there one time after Lindsay and had borrowed my stroller. But that's somewhere I went to pick up. He says, okay, does Lindsay live with her mother, Cheryl? Roberta says she used to live with her mother, Cheryl. I don't know if she still does. I've heard she's living with her grandma sometimes, too. So just to take a break from this, does everybody see how he asks her a question and she starts to answer it and then goes off on another tangent? Has anybody picked up on that? And then he'll interrupt her and ask her another question. It's just weird. This whole questioning and the way she answers doesn't fully answer or goes off on a tangent. It's just weird to me. So, Gloria from Facebook says, I did notice. TJ Shuck says, seriously, these people are still hurting people and still being protected. Right. All right. Let's keep going. We've got a few more pages. Well, more than a few. And we got about 5 to get through. And so then his next question to her was, and then one other name you mentioned to us was Emily Sprinkle. She said, uh-huh, yes. He says, okay. And Emily Sprinkle lives at here in Tipton? She says, yes. And her phone number is? Yes, because we looked in the phone book for that. He says, and? Her answer is she's not real good friends. I mean, I don't think they're, like really good friends. They just went to, and he stops her. He says, but earlier, and she says, to the school together on Wednesday. He says, right. She says, and walked home together. He says, okay, earlier you had told us that Emily and Tabby were together at the GED class, correct? She said, correct. He says, and that was on Wednesday between 1 and 3 p.m. She says, yes. He says, is there anyone else that we have not mentioned that might have information pertaining to what has happened to Tabby? She says, not that I know of. I did talk to Steve Jones. You asked me earlier other people that I had talked to, and I talked to Steve Jones last night. He called me. After we had left messages at his mother's house and stuff. But he didn't have any idea either. But I just now thought that you asked me who all I talked to, and I didn't tell you him. Is Steve Jones a friend of Tabby's? He was a friend of my son Michael's. And I mean, they're all kind of hung out together, but Steve doesn't live in town anymore. So they really don't hang out. But that was another story I heard. Kyle Netherton had said that Steve Jones was supposed to be getting off work at midnight Thursday night, and he was taking Tabby to a rave in Indianapolis. And when I heard that, and I don't remember which one of these people ever told me it, but I'm like, that's BS, because Tabby would not leave this baby for 24 hours to go to a party, and if she's going to party, she would just ask me to babysit. He says, okay, and was that with Kyle Neff? Roberta says, I was told that was one of the stories that Kyle Neff said was that Tabby was supposed to be meeting Steve Jones at midnight Thursday night. Detective says, okay. Roberta says, I'm sorry about, I forgot about that earlier. he says, and the reason you don't think that's an accurate statement is because you have talked with Tabby and Michael about if they go party or do something, there are certain things they are to do. She says, yeah, which was to have me babysit the baby. He said, so there would be no reason for Tabby to lie about something like that. She says, no, none at all. None at all. Because I've kept that baby when they've been to Kyle and Amanda's for a party. I've kept that baby when Kyle and Amanda and other people were at Michael and Tabby's house. So, and Tabby had been out drinking with her girlfriends at one of their houses one night. And, she told me what she was going to be doing. She was going to go over there. They were going to drink some beer, watch movies, and I wanted to know if I could keep Drake. I kept the baby that there's no reason why, if Tabby was going to be going to a party or something like that, she wouldn't just say, I'm going to a party, will you keep the baby? He said, okay. She says, he says, Tim, is there something you would like to add? Tim says, you remember who told you that Kyle later said that he did not take Tabby to town? She says, I believe that's what he told Mark Tate, which is Tabby's stepfather. Tim says, okay, do you remember? But she stops him. She says, okay, but Michael told me that when he called me the Thursday afternoon, told me that the dispatcher up there said that's what Kyle Neff had told Deputy Jeff Pike. And I think that's the reason why Michael went ahead and came home from school. So, Tim says, okay, do you remember who told you about Kyle? Said he drove through town on the motorcycle and seen him. Reply, Emily Brown. Tiffany. Boatwright. I'm trying to think who all was saying these things. And how about where Kyle's wife and baby drove through town and stopped and talked to her? That was also I believe, the Tiffany and Emily. They went out to Kyle and Amanda's house Thursday night, and in the time they were there, Kyle and Amanda told them they come straight up here and made statements because they stood out there and changed their story like 3 or 4 times in the little bit of time that they were out there that night. So the police have statements from those girls because they kept changing their story out there. So I believe that's when, what's Tiffany's last name? Boatwright, I believe. And Emily's? Brown. Brown, that's my daughter's girlfriend. That's all? Is there anything else you would like to add before we conclude the statement? Other than I don't believe that Tabby did anything when she left my house, other than the fact that I honestly believe she thought she was going to the hospital. Okay. Did she indicate who contacted her or who wanted her to come to the hospital? Answer. No, just that Kyle was, out front or not out front, but outside waiting on her. She was really rushed because he was out. Because I started asking some more questions. Because at first I could not remember who Amanda was. I'm like, who's Amanda? Whose grandmother? She's like, Kyle's girlfriend, Amanda. And I'm like, oh, okay, And she like, I really gotta go because Kyle's outside waiting on me. So, they ask again, and that's Amanda Pratt, correct? Correct. And she lives with Kyle Neff. Yes. But my only comment is, I honestly, with everything I own, believe that's what Tabby thought she was doing when she left my house. Just because there was no reason for her to lie about anything. He says, earlier, did you tell me that Michael and Tabby had been going through a little bit of a rough spell a few months back? Her answer, yeah, they did. Question, okay, that in the last month things had gotten better? Her answer, oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, and they had money problems, and they were just both stressing. And he says, and is it correct Michael had got a new job? She said, right. He said in the last few weeks that he was going to school 4 evenings a week, correct? Right. But Michael also got grants through his school to pay the bills, which made things and Tabby just like. Okay, so let me restart this answer of hers. She says, right. But Michael also got grants through his school to pay the bills, which made things. And Tabby just said, like Monday, that it was just like when they dat. Like Michael had gotten back to life when they were dating because he had gotten really grumpy. I mean, I had talked to him a couple of times about his anger and his attitude. And, and he's just like, I can't pay the bills. I can't do this. No. And. Okay. The detective says, but things have kind of turned around and we're looking up. She said, oh, yeah. He says, Roberta, do you swear under the penalties of perjury that the information that you have given in the statement is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. She says, yes, I do. Absolutely. This will be the end of the statement. The time is 9:29 p.m. The date is 10/5/2002. All right, so I know that was rough to listen to because of her answers and his questions, but I want to know what everybody's thinking listening to that. What are your thoughts about how she answered, anything that she said, any contradictions? I'm looking through the comments here. Vid Inquiry says justice for Tabitha. Absolutely. Okay, so I showed that. Mike Tarr didn't stay on board. Tony Frawley took his place as state detective. Okay, so is this the only statement? I got to look through the other ones to see if this was the only one that Mike was a part of. Tony Frawley was a patrol officer, totally inexperienced as a detective. Yeah, never minding that Michael and Tabitha was fighting as well. Don't want to implicate her son. Vid says, fighting is fighting, go with your gut. Mark says, keep in mind, folks, that during this time, Michael was reported as talking about divorce to people at the town pool hall. Tabitha's cousin overheard this and reported it in a deposition. Not sure the date he witnessed that, but it was the summer of 2002. Andrea says, mind you, in the statement she gave on the 3rd, she said she called Kyle's twice and no one answered. But then on the 5th, she said she didn't know his number. Vid says, sounds like a loophole of lies. Mark says, but in other deposition, Roberta said it was out of the norm for Tabitha to bring Drake to her to go around with friends. She also said there was no reason for Tabitha to ever lie to her. Correct. She also told it was cool for Tabitha to leave Drake with her and Tabitha could go party with friends. Wasn't saying it wasn't out of the norm for her to bring Drake to her. Okay, so that was regarding the storms. Let's see here. We showed this one from TJ. Mark says, never ending that Michael and Steve were roommates at Michael's apartment after Tabitha's murder. They got into a fight, and Steve Jones moved to Kokomo to a family member of his. Interesting. Roberta would talk about people but never implicate her kids' wrongs. That's usually, yeah, I can see that. He says, you know the type of my baby does no wrong. Cheryl says, seems like this lady just talks in circles. That's exactly what I thought. Starts a statement, changes it, starts talking about that, changes it. Made my head swim. Mark says, absolutely not. Tabby made it aware to us that life with Michael was rough. He wasn't being the husband, dad to Drake, or provider for them all. TJ says, double talk and lies. Gloria says, it's kind of ironic that Sweet Revenge, I think the detective twisted things around as to try and catch her lying, and it was confusing her. Well, I think she was, I don't know. I think she was confused right off the bat on some things and tried to spin things one way. I don't know. So why would Tabby discuss Kyle's drug debt to his mom? Ooh. I thought about that too. Thinking about teenagers. You don't go tell your mother-in-law that Kyle stole cocaine from somebody and now they were threatening his girlfriend and his baby's life. Mark says, Steve Jones and Michelle dating underage girls from Elmwood not 2 months after Tabitha's murder. Steve Jones got arrested for having sex with a minor, but Michael didn't. Our Facebook user says, honestly, it was almost like she was on drugs. Yeah. couldn't keep her story straight, couldn't answer straight. No. Now, I do know that Roberta, the family wanted Roberta to take a lie detector test, but the police never gave her one. Not once. Yes, they did find her body. They found her body on October 5th in the park in the creek. So the reason that I wanted to read this one first is because the story starts out with Roberta about Tabitha coming into the house saying that Amanda wanted her to go to the hospital because her grandmother wasn't going to make it through the night. I don't think that's something that's Tabby would lie about. So did Kyle tell her this as a way to get her out of the house that night? Andrew says, only gave Michael and Kyle lie detector tests that we have record of. Correct. And yes, Michael did flunk his lie detector test. Cheryl says, I live in Indy. I remember back when they found her body and seen it in the news. Yeah. That would be interesting if you guys could get your hands on that audio. Getting anything from Tipton is like me voluntarily ramming my head into a brick wall. It's so hard to get information from them. His first one he flunked was blamed on drugs he was taking for depression. Yeah. And that'll all come out. You know, the lie detector tests, what questions were asked, what he flunked. That's the big question, Cheryl. If Michael flunked 2 lie detector tests, why did they not pursue him further? Exactly. So what I'm going to do is, there are so many statements and depositions that we have to go through. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get together with Frank so that he can read these with me. He can be the detective, and I'll be whoever the person is that they're interviewing. And we're going to pre-record some of these videos to be able to get the information out faster. Because there's a lot. There's so much. We've been on here an hour and 30 minutes, and I was hoping to get through this and some of Michael's deposition, and we haven't even gotten to his. And there's actually 3 of them for him, so it's going to take a while. Yeah. Sweet revenge. Kyle probably killed her. Was there any new life insurance on Tabitha? That would have to be a question that Mark answers. I hope one day that, yes, we all do. Mark says, yes, Cheryl, they are covering each other, not only citizens, but I feel it's much bigger than that. I would have to agree with that. And that'll all come out later. So now you've heard the first deposition, where it all started. Okay. Tabby going home saying, "Can you watch the baby?" And what Roberta says happened afterwards. The next depositions that we're going to read are Michael's. And like I said, there's a few of them. So I'm going to try to break them out into 2 pre-recorded videos and release the videos so that all of you can hear them. And when I do the thumbnail and create the stream, each one will be part 4 Michael's deposition, part 5 Michael's deposition, so you know that that's what we're talking about. Mark says, as far as him and Buffy know, that there's no life insurance. But like I said, for those that like to think critically, like to listen to this information, go back and watch this episode. Take notes. Because as I read other depositions, you're going to come back to this one and say, hey, wait a minute. And you're going to start pointing out contradictions to me. I can see it already. I mean, they didn't even get the date right on this one. She says it happened September 3rd or September 2nd. And it was actually October. Yeah, it's very important to take notes. Believe me, Andrea has tons of notes. I have notes. So, fresh eyes. We're hoping all of you can help us look at this and figure this out in the end. Mark, anything else that you want to say in the chat about Roberta's statement? Anybody else have any comments? All I can tell you is that if you thought listening to that was tough, try reading it, because it was even worse. If you are not a member of the Justice for Tabitha Facebook site, please come join the group. I have put a link in the chat. This week, I'm going to start releasing a lot of information as far as old news articles, because those news articles are important to go along with these statements and with the police information. Because I can tell you, the information on Tabitha's death from the police compared to what the pathologist said in the trial for Liz Balser doesn't match. And Andrea's right. Better you get a couple notebooks. I printed over 500 pages already. So, Miracle Hearts 2. There's 2 stories. According to Roberta, Amanda was at the hospital with her grandmother, who wasn't expected to make it through the night. Yet, in the statements here, we heard that Amanda was home that night because she had been at the hospital all day. There was no life-threatening issue with the grandmother. She simply had a knee surgery. So that means, why did Tabby tell Roberta that Kyle was picking her up to take her to the hospital because Amanda's grandmother wasn't going to make it through the night, when that wasn't true at all. And especially since the girls weren't really talking to each other. What are your thoughts on that? Leave me a comment below in the underneath the video. Mark says the police, with only her words and a few others implicating, to do an investigation into Elizabeth Balser and Kyle Neff, all without a lie detector on any one of them. That is correct. And she starts the official story by telling the cops that Tabby left to go with Kyle Neff to the hospital to see Amanda's grandmother because she wasn't expected to make it. And Andrea brings up a good point. There is no documentation as to where Amanda was after 4 p.m., the day of the murder, except her saying she was at home. This is a possibility. Amanda could have been saying that about her grandmother just to set her up and get her out of the house. And there are, now, Roberta talked about it, and there's going to be another statement, I believe, that says that Kyle and Amanda and their baby went to town, and they both talked to Tabby out in front of the VP. But then all the rest of the stories are that Amanda was at home. So this starts, you'll see why this case drives me absolutely bonkers and crazy. You can already see just by this one statement. And this statement is what starts it all. And that's why I started with this one. Miracle Heart 2 says, or maybe Tabby gave the grandma story to get out of her house and have a babysitter to spend the evening with Kyle. Interesting. But Roberta said, if Tabby wanted to go party, all she had to do was say, hey, can you watch the baby so I can go party? Why didn't she use that as an excuse? That's why Roberta says she believed her when Tabby said she was going to the hospital to see Amanda's grandmother because she wasn't expected to live. Tabitha would not have needed to lie about that. If she was going to go out and meet Liz Balser and go to a party, or if she was going to meet somebody else and go to a party. And yes, that right there has been discussed. Cheryl says, lots of people covering up for each other. You got that right. I think I've gotten everybody's comments. Bid said could be. Who knows? Yep. And Marcus is right. There's so much that you don't know as to why we entertain that thought. But there's many reasons we can't discuss it on an open forum. We'll get into some reasons, but not all of them. Sounds like Amanda is responsible, especially if she doesn't have a rock-solid alibi. Somebody in that group is definitely responsible. Who is it, though? Is it Amanda and Kyle? Is it Michael, Amanda, and Kyle? Yeah, there's a lot of things that doesn't fit. But like you said, we're going to start next with Michael's depositions. There's multiple. I think it's important to bring you that next. I'm going to do pre-recorded videos and drop them so that you all can watch them at your leisure. And then after I'm all done with Michael's depositions and pre-recorded videos, it might take 2 or 3 videos to do this. I'm going to try to keep them in an hour and a half because it's hard to listen to. But after we're done with all of Michael's depositions, then we'll come back and do another live stream and talk about them. Because I want to know what you guys think and what your thoughts are on the depositions and the information that he gives out. But like you said, if there's anything that you noticed that you think I should know, please email me. I want to make sure that I'm catching everything, and the best way to do that is have all of your eyes and ears open too. Well, that's the big question. Amanda may have given Kyle an ultimatum. She may have. And is that the reason why the girls had the falling out? Is Kyle? Yep, we'll get more into that vid. But yes. And through Michael's statements and depositions, you will hear how much of a relationship they all had. Yes, thank you all for tuning in tonight. We want justice for Tabitha. This is our way of putting everything out there. You know, we're holding everyone accountable for the stories and the information that they gave 20 years ago, because it doesn't add up. Yes, and just want you guys to see, I got my shirt. So this is one of them, Justice for Tabitha. If you are interested in getting one of these shirts, go to the Justice for Tabitha Facebook group page. And let me find it. I'll give it here again. I am going to pin the post for the merchandise for Tabitha. So now remember, I had some people say, wow, those prices are kind of expensive. Well, no, not really. Because $5 of the price for any Tabitha merchandise comes to us at True Crime Marvin Frank, and $5 goes to Mark for the lawyer fund. So, well, now we have different colors and things, so take a look. So tomorrow I I will try to get a hold of Frank to see if we can pre-record some of Michael's first deposition. Because I'd like to have two of us, not just me reading both parts. I did that tonight just to get the information out. But watch for the pre-recorded videos. I will let you know when those videos are going to drop before they drop. I'll put it on our community page on YouTube. I'll put it on the True Crime with Marv and Frank Facebook group, and I will also put it on the Justice for Tabitha Shuck Reigns Facebook group. So you will know when those videos drop. And then if we can get that done, and there's 3 or 4 parts, I'm not sure. We'll figure it out. After that, we'll have another live stream on a Saturday night so that Mark can join us. And we will discuss those depositions and answer any questions you have. So, yes, True Crime News is helping me create a video. Actually, he's creating a video for me because I haven't had time. He is going to show me how to make videos, and that will be dropping here tomorrow. And that is a video on Tabitha. So, thank you all for joining me. If you're watching this on the rerun because you weren't able to join us tonight, thank you so much. And until the next video drops, go back and watch the other ones and this one and take your notes. Oh, Miracle Hearts, you are just on the ball. That will, no, is the answer to that question. I don't believe so. But we'll get into that later, too. There's so much. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. If you have any questions, email me at marv.n.frank@gmail.com. Yep, and tomorrow's video need notes to be taken too. Keep all your notes together. Have a great weekend, everyone. Stay safe for those who might be affected in the storms tonight and tomorrow. And prayers and thoughts for all those who have already been affected. Thank you and have a great night.